Oh, the COVID-19 vaccine being developed by Pfizer and the German company BioNTech now appears to be 95% effective in final results from a huge study. In addition to that, it's showing signs that it is safe.
Yeah. Now, joining us now to talk about what this all means is Dr. David Banach from UConn Health. Doctor, thanks so much for joining us again. Big news this morning, especially 5% more up from last week and what we initially heard. Your thoughts on this?
So thanks for having me on. I think there's a lot of optimism coming from this data that's been presented from Pfizer. I think the vaccine showed to be quite efficacious, and the rate of infection among those who got the vaccine compared to the placebo was very much substantially lower. And I think that's reason for a lot of optimism.
Okay, why don't you talk about what you like about how this study was conducted in terms of sort of the cohort populations and who got the vaccine and who didn't?
So I think there's a couple of keys. First, it was a very large study, so over 40,000 participants in this phase 3 clinical trial, which I think is really important. I think when we look at the makeup of the study population, there was a very large focus on having a racial and ethnically diverse population, which is really critical. We know that there's been health disparities, and that racial and ethnicity has been a really important factor in seeing who develops severe illness. And the fact that individuals from those groups were included is really critical. I think there's a large elderly population in the study group, and that's also really important, thinking about the impact that this vaccine can have.
What are the next steps going forward now?
So, I think at this point, the company is preparing for an application for an emergency use authorization, the EUA, from the FDA. At that point, the FDA will review that application, determine whether or not it meets that criteria. And there'll be other groups as well, advisory groups to the FDA, as well as the CDC, that will review the data. And then that'll determine what the next steps are and how this vaccine can eventually become available to the public.
So now we have this vaccine. We also have Moderna's vaccine. Both of them use the same technology. Both of them seem to have the same kind of efficacy rate. You say 95%. Does that surprise you at all that these new technologies wound up being so promising, at least at this point?
I think that's a great sign. The new technology that you're referring to is what we call an mRNA technology. So it actually involves administering the genetic code for the virus, not the actual live virus itself, and allows the person receiving the virus to make the necessary proteins that lead to the immune response to a vaccine. And that's a technology that is very effective, and now we see that in the clinical setting. So I think that's a really promising thing for this vaccine, but also thinking about future vaccines. This technology may become sort of the main way that we start to create vaccines in the future. So I think it's a great thing.
All right, Dr. David Banach from UConn Health, thanks so much for your time this morning and also for your expertise.
Thanks for having me.